June 18, 1943, Frostpeak Island, Northern Archipelago. The wind tore across the jagged ridges like a living beast, slicing through every crevice and clawing at exposed skin. Sergeant Michael Hayes crouched at the ruined mouth of a Japanese bunker, his flashlight beam cutting a narrow path through the darkness. Then he froze. Dozens of eyes reflected back at him from the shadows. Not armed soldiers but women, 15 of them, frail, hollow-cheeked, barely alive. Michael lowered his rifle slightly, his mind struggling to process the scene. The air was already turning to ice. A storm was gathering on the horizon, a blizzard that could erase anyone caught outside in minutes. They had maybe 2 hours before visibility dropped to zero, before the cold became a silent executioner. The women were huddled together, wrapped in threadbare army coats and tattered blankets. One stepped forward, her black hair streaked with gray, the remnants of a nurse's uniform clinging to her frail body. She bent into a precise bow and spoke in halting English. "We are nurses. Please, help us even in the chaos of war." Michael felt a weight in his chest. These women had been abandoned not by the rescuers, but by their own side. Frostpeak Island was the very edge of the northern archipelago, where wind never ceased and fog swallowed men whole. Here, temperatures could drop by dozens of degrees in a single hour, and the cold killed as efficiently as any bullet. The enemy had occupied the island in mid-1942, establishing a strategic foothold. By May 1943, the Allied forces launched an offensive to reclaim it. The battle that followed was among the bloodiest in the Northern Campaign. Hundreds of soldiers were killed or wounded, and of nearly 3,000 defenders, only a few dozen survived. Among them were 15 women Imperial Army nurses volunteers tasked with caring for the wounded. Under the harshest conditions imaginable, they had endured frostbite, gangrene, and infected wounds in damp, underground bunkers, surviving on shrinking rice rations, melted snow, and the heat of burning scraps of paper. When the attackers arrived, the enemy commanders ordered a last-ditch banzai assault, instructing the nurses to stay behind and tend the dying. Survival was not expected, it was dishonorable. Yet chaos intervened. Communication lines were cut. Officers fell. The 15 women were trapped in a forgotten bunker, surviving for months on scraps and hope, assumed dead by their own side. Until now, when Sergeant Hayes and his small team discovered the impossible. Life enduring in the icy darkness. Enemy soldiers who refused to surrender could strike at any moment. Sergeant Michael Hayes signaled to Private Daniel Kim to move left, while he and Private Robert Turner edged right. Behind a low drift, Private Ethan Moore kept watch, rifle ready. Daniel was 32, a second-generation immigrant from San Francisco, fluent in Japanese. The war had left him with personal reasons to despise the enemy. Robert, a seasoned career soldier from Alabama, had fought in deserts hotter than any storm he could imagine. Ethan, just 20, still believed the world was black and white, good and evil clearly defined. Michael crouched at the bunker entrance, switching on his flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a scene that froze his blood. Countless eyes stared back, not those of fighters, but hollow, terrified eyes. And then there was something else, fragile, desperate hope. "Don't fire!" Michael shouted, keeping his rifle raised but steady. Behind him, he heard Daniel shift into position, the soft click of Robert's safety disengaging. Slowly, figures emerged from the shadows. Women, gaunt and trembling, wrapped in threadbare blankets and oversized army coats. They moved like ghosts, faces blank with exhaustion. Michael had seen horrors, but the sight of these women, barely alive, struck harder than any battle he had faced. One woman stepped forward, older than the rest, perhaps in her early 30s. Black hair streaked with gray peeked from beneath a battered nurse's uniform. Despite her condition, she held herself with quiet dignity. She bowed and spoke in hesitant English. "We are nurses. Please, mercy." The word hung in the frozen air. Mercy. Michael lowered his rifle. Robert let out a low whistle. "By God." They've been here all this time. Michael counted them. 15 women, all malnourished, frostbitten, some barely able to stand. One slumped against the wall, eyes half closed, breathing shallow. Another had hands wrapped in blood-stained bandages. Daniel reached for the radio. Only static. The cold had likely killed the batteries, or the island's jagged ridges blocked the signal. Either way, they were on their own. Michael glanced outside. The sky was darkening, the wind shifting. Experienced soldiers could read it. A storm was coming. They had maybe 2 hours before the blizzard struck, and anyone caught outside would die. He made a decision. We take them back to base. Now, Ethan's eyes widened. Sarge, base is 8 miles through this storm. These women can't walk that far. Michael nodded. 8 miles in calm weather would have been a long hike. In a blizzard, it was a death march. But leaving them wasn't an option. Robert leaned close, voice low. We've got 4 men, 15 civilians, and a storm on the way. Odds aren't good. We might not make it. Michael met his gaze. They aren't the enemy. Not anymore. They're just people who need help. If we leave them, we're no better than those who forgot them here. Robert held his gaze, then slowly nodded. All right. Let's do it. The women seemed to understand enough to know they were being rescued. Rescue was foreign to them. They had been taught to fear Americans, to expect cruelty. Yet these soldiers looked at them with something close to pity. The oldest nurse, Hannah, began organizing the others, speaking rapidly in Japanese. Slowly, the women gathered what little they had: a torn blanket, a small medical bag, a faded photograph. Hannah had been a nurse for over a decade, trained at a prestigious hospital in Tokyo. She had delivered babies, set broken bones, and comforted the dying, but nothing could prepare her for this frozen island. She had watched women under her care die of starvation, cold, and disease, and she had kept them working, kept them moving, refusing despair. Now, facing these soldiers, control threatened to slip. Rescue meant life, but surrender meant shame. She heard her father's voice in her mind, death before dishonor. Yet looking at her young charges, some barely 18, she made a choice: life, whatever the cost. Michael and his men did what they could. They shared rations, hard biscuits that tasted like cardboard, frozen chocolate bars broken with rifle butts, water from canteens already beginning to freeze. The women ate slowly, almost afraid to finish. Hannah insisted everything be shared equally, not a crumb wasted. As they prepared to move, Michael assessed the situation. 3 women could not walk at all, their feet blackened and swollen from frostbite. 5 more could barely shuffle. Only 7 could attempt the journey on foot. We'll have to carry them, Robert said quietly, as if stating a fact, not asking. They fashioned crude stretchers from tent canvas and broken rifles. Michael and Robert lifted one, Daniel and Ethan the other. The walking wounded followed, roped together for safety, led by Hannah. Michael checked his compass. Base was northwest, 8 miles across jagged terrain. In good weather, the trek would take 3 hours. In this blizzard, it could take 5, or they might not make it at all. Michael glanced at the sky. The clouds were dark now, heavy, moving fast. Snow began to fall light at first, twirling in the wind, but Michael knew it would soon become a wall of white. There was no time to waste. 20 minutes into their trek, the blizzard struck. Visibility vanished in seconds. One moment, he could see 50 yards ahead. The next, everything was a blinding white roar. The wind cut sideways, stabbing exposed skin like needles. The temperature plummeted, stealing sensation from face and fingers alike. Michael's cheeks went numb, ice forming in his eyebrows. His gloves no longer protected his hands. This was how people died on Frostpeak Island, not by bullets, but by cold creeping in, slowly stealing life. He had tied a rope to each person, creating a human chain. Without it, they would have been separated in minutes. Even with the rope, he could barely see the man in front of him. Michael carried the first woman on his back. She was small, barely 90 pounds, but the freezing wind made her feel twice as heavy. Her arms clung weakly round his neck. her shivering pressed against him like a fragile heartbeat. Every step was agony. The snow was knee-deep, and in the deeper drifts, his legs burned. The thin, icy air of the island made each breath feel like it wasn't enough. But he kept moving. Step by step. Behind him, Robert carried another woman. She was unconscious, her head lolling against his shoulder, arms limp. Robert had survived the deserts of North Africa, the heat that had killed men, but he had never faced anything like this. Daniel and Ethan rotated carrying the third woman, switching every 10 minutes. Daniel's face was a mask of grim determination, but his eyes betrayed fear. For men, 15 women, 8 miles, and 20 below zero with wind chill and zero visibility. It was near suicidal. Yet turning back was not an option. The women would die if they stopped. And despite the rage he held in his heart for the enemy, Daniel could not abandon them. The other nurses who could walk helped support the weaker. Hannah moved up and down the line, whispering softly in Japanese, urging, encouraging, insisting that no one give up. She pushed where needed, held where needed, and refused to let anyone fall behind. The first hour was hell. Wind cut through their clothes like knives. Snow worked its way inside every layer, soaking them to the bone. Michael's feet went numb first, then his hands, then his face. He could barely feel the woman on his back except for her weight. Stopping meant death. He could not pause. The second hour was worse. The compass was useless in the whiteout. He relied on memory and instinct, searching for landmarks now buried under snow. At one point, he was certain they were lost. Then Daniel shouted. Ahead, a narrow ravine offered some protection from the wind. It wasn't much, but it was enough. They huddled there, pressing together for warmth. The men formed an outer ring, shielding the women from the worst of the storm. No one spoke. Speaking wasted precious energy. They breathed in and out, watching their misted breath crystallize in the air, fighting to preserve heat, fighting to stay alive. After 20 minutes, they had to move again. Staying still meant freezing to death. The cold was deceptive. Sleep seemed like relief, but sleep here was death. Michael hoisted the woman back onto his shoulders. Her shivering had stopped. That was a warning. Hypothermia was setting in, the body conserving heat for vital organs. He needed to move faster, but faster was impossible. Ethan collapsed suddenly, falling into the snow like a marionette with cut strings. Daniel grabbed him, dragging him upright with strength they both didn't know they had. I can't, Ethan gasped, teeth chattering. I'm done. Michael turned, scanning the blizzard through tears of snow and exhaustion. Through the swirling snow, Michael could barely make out Ethan's face. Yes, you can, he said, not with encouragement or sympathy, but as an unyielding fact. You will, because if you don't, we all die here, every single one of us. The words hit hard, brutal, but they worked. Something sparked in Ethan's eyes, anger, shame, or pure survival instinct. He rose, grabbed the rope, and pressed on. When one of the nurses sank to the snow, Hannah knelt beside her, spoke urgently, and gave a firm slap that brought her back. She hauled the woman to her feet and kept the line moving, relentless in a way that stunned Michael. Exhausted as anyone, she refused to let anyone quit. We survived together, she told him in rough English. No one left behind. Michael could only nod. The blizzard worsened. Wind clawed at their clothes, their faces, their resolve. Time became a blur of white agony. Michael saw phantom lights, heard voices carried in the storm. He forced himself forward, repeating a mantra. My name is Michael Hayes. I will not die here. The woman on his back murmured something in Japanese, a prayer, a farewell he couldn't tell, but felt its weight deep in his chest. Another nurse collapsed without warning, unconscious but faintly breathing. Ethan whispered the brutal truth. We leave her, or we all die. Michael met Hannah's eyes and saw the answer. We carry her, he said. And so they did. They rotated every 10 minutes, each shift pure agony, moving only because stopping meant death. Hours later, when the storm finally eased, the snow-covered supply depot emerged through the white haze. Lieutenant Ross nearly fired, mistaking them for enemies until he realized they were alive. And the women were alive too. Medics rushed out. The woman on Michael's back opened her eyes, whispering something he couldn't understand, but felt in every fiber of him. Hannah checked the unconscious girl and finally smiled. "She lives. You saved her." Even the medics were stunned to see Hannah standing, steady as ever. "Death is easy," she told them. "Living is hard." Years later, Hannah traveled to Michael's home in Ohio to thank him. When she passed away decades later, Michael made a quiet pilgrimage to Frostbitten Island, leaving an origami crane at her resting place, a symbol of hope, courage, and the unbreakable bond forged in the storm. And today, as you watch this story, remember, in the harshest winters of life, even the smallest act of mercy can carry someone from the edge of death into the warmth of survival. Hold on. Help when you can. No one is truly alone.